For a long time, people believed that once the brain was damaged, that was it, especially when it is affected by something like schizophrenia. Some doctors would say, "This is your life now. It won't get better, but just try to manage it the best you can." And if you've ever heard that, either as a patient or a parent, you know how heavy those words can be. You know exactly how that can make one feel. However, what if I told you that is not the full story? What if the brain could actually change, even after something as serious as schizophrenia? Not magically or overnight, but little by little, with the right habits, support, and time. That's what brain science is starting to show us now. It's called neuroplasticity, and it simply means your brain can slowly start to function better again. For people living with schizophrenia and their loved ones, that's not just science. That's hope. In this video, we're going to talk about what neuroplasticity really means, why it matters in schizophrenia, and the small things that might make a big difference. In the early 20th century, being diagnosed with schizophrenia was seen as the end of the road. Doctors believed the brain was damaged and that it could only get worse. There were no real treatments and no real hope of recovery. Patients were often sent away to institutions, and some never came back. They were subjected to harsh procedures and treatments like insulin comas, electric shocks, even lobotomies. But unfortunately, the goal of these treatments wasn't cure, it was control, and that's how things stayed for decades. That was before we understood how adaptable the human brain really is. Back then, the brain was seen as fixed. It was believed that if something broke, it stayed broken. Leading psychiatrists like Emil Kraepelin laid the groundwork by describing the condition as dementia praecox, and Eugen Bleuler gave schizophrenia its name. But they also shaped the belief that it was a lifelong decline, something you survived, not something you improved or recovered from. But over time, that belief started to crack. In the 60s and 70s, the rise of neuroscience began to ask different questions, and researchers started to notice something no one had really seen before. They discovered that the brain wasn't standing still, and that opened the door to a new idea, one that changed everything. Maybe the brain isn't fixed at all. Maybe it can bend, shift, learn, and unlearn, even after something like schizophrenia. That's where the story of neuroplasticity began. It is an ability of the brain to rewire itself. It means your brain can change. It can form new connections, adapt, and in some cases, it can even work around the parts that aren't functioning well. Think of it like this. If one road in your brain is blocked, neuroplasticity helps build a different route in the brain to get to the same place. For years, scientists believed the brain stopped changing after childhood, that once you were grown, your brain was set. But now, we know that's not true. The brain is always changing, especially when we learn, practice, or even just try something new. For people with schizophrenia, this is a huge game changer, because many of the symptoms like hallucinations, disorganized thinking, memory loss, don't come from brain damage, but from disrupted neural pathways. Pathways that, under the right conditions, can change. And science is showing us that it is still possible for the brain to find new ways to function. Neuroplasticity is not here to perform some magic tricks, but it's here to relieve some of the burden and symptoms, such as prefrontal cortex dysfunction and dopamine dysregulation that comes with schizophrenia. These symptoms are actually the potential targets for neuroplasticity interventions. That doesn't mean it's easy or fast, but it does mean change is possible. And that possibility, especially for people living with schizophrenia, matters more than ever. And the most important thing is the brain you have now isn't the brain you're stuck with. In recent years, studies from Harvard, UCLA, and in several European clinics have discovered something remarkable. They found out that with the right kind of cognitive training, gray matter volume can actually increase in the brain in key areas, including the prefrontal cortex, that plays a huge role in decision-making, focus, and emotional control. Tools like cognitive remediation therapy, neurofeedback, and even mindfulness training have gone from buzzwords to real-world strategies that help the brain rebuild healthier wiring. And the results have been genuinely life-changing. One participant, a young man diagnosed at 19, was able to return to college after a year of neuroplasticity-based therapy. And in another patient, hallucinations reduced, and he was able to start speaking more clearly again. And this was achieved through digital cognitive exercises. These stories aren't outliers. More and more studies are showing that with consistency and support, brain structure can change even in people living with schizophrenia. And it's not just high-tech therapy that bring about these changes. Simple things like regular social interaction and meditation have also been shown to support neuroplasticity. Now that we know that the brain is always responding, the question is, what are we giving it to work with? On Reddit, a mother shared something she'd noticed about her son that stuck with me. Her son had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and the only thing he seemed interested in was playing video games alone, in his room. So she decided to encourage him. At first she thought it was just an escape, a way to shut out the world. But then she noticed something strange. He was taking notes, tiny ones, scribbled into a notepad next to his desk. The first time she saw the tiny handwritten notes, she thought they might be like the notes he wrote when he first became ill, just repetitive nonsense. But no, these notes were trail markers, clues for solving puzzles inside the games. He was tracking progress, making plans, strategizing, and remembering patterns. And at one point, he even asked for a special mic so he could talk in group games. She found out later that his CBT therapist had encouraged him to verbalize more during online gaming. Over time, his thinking was clearer, and his cognition became sharper than anyone expected. The doctors noticed, and so did his mom. Looking back, she started to wonder, could the games, the puzzles, the notes, could they have actually helped his brain stay active? All this while, was this his brain's way of finding a way to stay active? With what we now know about neuroplasticity, that idea isn't far-fetched. In fact, it might be exactly how healing begins. Neuroplasticity isn't a miracle. It won't erase schizophrenia. It won't undo the hard days or take away the need for medication, therapy, or support. But it can offer something that was missing for far too long. Possibility. The possibility that the brain isn't stuck, that healing isn't off the table, that slow, quiet progress is still progress. And for someone who's been told over and over again that this is just the way things are, a little bit of progress means everything. A little more peace, a little more connection to life. It means hope. It can mean remembering something important, saying a sentence more clearly, feeling just a little more like yourself again. And if the brain can keep trying to grow, then maybe we can too. And as science advances, AI-driven brain mapping, personalized therapy, and even virtual reality may unlock new layers of plasticity we've only begun to understand. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and share the video with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.